Hello, I'm meteorologist Nathan Scott. Welcome to WeatherWise. We are talking about January because January can be a wild month here in the natural state. Sometimes we have ice storms, sometimes we have snowstorms, and sometimes we have severe weather. And today I've got Chief Meteorologist Tom Brannon to join me on the discussion of what happened when we had the worst tornado outbreak on record in Arkansas. You remember it very clearly, January 21st to the 22nd. Back in 1999.
I remember some things clearly. There are others that are a little foggy. First of all, that was the second major severe weather outbreak, March 1, 97, and then this one in 99 were the first two that I really experienced in my young meteorology days.
But just growing up here in Arkansas, we didn't have outbreaks in January. This was something that wasn't really known.
This was pretty unique, yeah.
This is a beautiful graphic that shows the tornadoes for the month of January. We could take this full, Perry, and you can see not too much showing up here from 1950 all the way through 1998. There were a few F3s in the orange lines, but then you look to the right, 1950 all the way to 2024, and a lot of these long track tornadoes and strong tornadoes are because of what happened in 1999.
Yeah, and that turned out to be a fairly significant severe weather day. And I was telling Nathan a few minutes ago that I didn't quite remember the risk. I know that it was going to be a bad day. We had everything in place and we were talking about severe weather, but we were under a high risk that day.
We were under a high risk that day. Do you remember how the environment was? Like, did it just feel like tornado weather?
Absolutely. You think back to that day, it just felt like something was going to pop. It was a very warm January day. We had a strong storm system that was approaching us from the west, and everything just fell into place. That sometimes the ingredients are there, sometimes they're not, but this time around it did.
Yeah.
And it was a very bad day. It was a bad day with, like, I'm going to let you do all the detailing here, but largest tornado outbreak we've had.
56 tornadoes.
Yeah.
And there were like 70-some tornado warnings that were issued by Little Rock National Weather Service. Kept you and Ed very busy.
Yeah.
I'm certainly, you're probably tired that day. You're probably exhausted from just keeping up with everything because we didn't have what we have now with the National Weather Service chat. You just had to be ready to go.
Yeah, and even back then, to a point, you didn't have teams covering weather. Ed was here.
Yeah.
For him to it was like every few seconds a new tornado warning has been issued, a new warning. He was here doing this, and I was out live. I was out at the intersection of 430 and Highway 10, or Cantrell Road out west. We had the perfect perspective of seeing this first round of supercells that were traveling from southwest to northeast that were impacting west central Arkansas. Every one of them, you could see a wall cloud. Every one of them had big hail with them, but those didn't produce a tornado in the Little Rock area. As you know, it was one of the ones that came up I-30 and went through the south side of town, the one that produced the tornado over here, off of Main Street. Took out the grocery store over there, the Harvest Foods.
The time frame, it was a short window. It was about like 5-6 hours of insanity, craziness, that the atmosphere just was so explosive. We're going to go over and talk about how everything's set up because we have the ability to look at past radar data, show you where those supercells were, but also thanks to the Storm Prediction Center and the data that they keep, we can go back and look at how it all set up.
Yeah.
How high did the temperatures get that day? And just looking at the jet stream and how it all played out and came together, unfortunately perfectly, for this to happen. 8 people died that day. There were 140 to 150 injuries from all these tornadoes across the region. So let's take a look at Storm Track 11 now, Perry, because we're going to go over, and here is the outlook that was issued, and it was a high risk. Now back then, we only had 3 categories. So you had slight, moderate, and high. And I'm sure seeing a high risk back in 1999 was something of major concern because you probably didn't see that very often.
Well, certainly not in January.
Yeah, January.
Yeah, you don't see very many of those in March, or you might see 1 or 2 of those in March or April, but certainly something like that, and that bullseye there that you look at in that little pink area does include the Little Rock area. Those storms grew stronger as they moved into central and then past central into eastern Arkansas. A little slight risk there. I was questioning Nathan a minute ago. Well, there's not a moderate. Normally you've got it broken down where you've got a slight, a moderate, a high. And these days we've got the marginal, the slight, the enhanced, and we've got so many different categories.
And this is a really cool website in case you want to check it out. It's through the SPC. It's just called the Violent Tornado Outbreak website, and it has every single outbreak that produced at least one violent tornado. That's an EF4 or F4 or greater. And you see them all lined up on the side here, all the way from the most recent years all the way back through the 1940s. So this is something really cool that any weather enthusiast would love. But here is the surface map. And when we look at this, Tom, as a meteorologist, I'm looking at, you got a low pressure developing out here into the panhandle of Texas, surface low, and then these red lines, that is going to be your surface temperature. So at 21Z, as those storms were really starting to explode over the region, it was really warm, for January, and it was also really humid. So yes, it's nice to get a little spring preview from time to time, but sometimes you pay the price for those warm temperatures, and in this case it was the largest tornado outbreak in Arkansas history. You can clearly see the moisture arriving from the Gulf with this perspective, and we'll take a look at the 850 jet here, and you look at those wind barbs, and I think they said that the 850 jet was approaching 60 to 70 knots as those storms are starting to develop. What does that mean in terms of keeping things a little bit simple? Okay, 850, 70 to 80 knot jet means we're in trouble as a meteorologist. You probably noticed the clouds were really flying
racing
across
on by.
the sky.
Another, the March 1 tornadoes, you could see that. Typically tornadoes happen March, April, May, but March 1, you're still kind of technically in wintertime, but I remember that day more clearly. I was at the Weather Service taking a test, and they sent up a balloon. It was about noontime, and it was an explosive situation. That cell that developed in southwest Arkansas was the one supercell that came through here, EF4. But I remember that the clouds were racing by. It was 80 degrees outside. You can feel tornado weather.
Yeah, you know something's not right.
Very similar feel that day. I would imagine we also had lots of moisture in place with that as well.
We can go back and look at the weather observations from the weather balloon. That's why I love this site. It has everything. So if you want to study past events, this is a great website to check out. But here we go with, this is at Little Rock. This is 12Z of the 21st. And you can see we have a cap or a lid on the atmosphere. And that is this area right here, because this red line is your temperature profile line. And typically your temperature goes down with height. It cools down. But this is known as a inversion, and this little triangle area, if I were to fill it in, that would be the cap. That would be something that really prevents any activity from growing early in the day. If the cap holds, we're safe. If the cap breaks, you have explosive development.
Right. And I know these were two different scenarios, but let's go back. It was about a week ago. We did have the low end marginal and slight risk, and we had a bit of a cap that held for most of the day.
Yeah.
It didn't pop. We were watching it. We were like, okay, please don't go. Please don't go. We didn't have a lot of instability. That was probably the main thing that was missing for that marginal / slight risk. So very thankful. But in this regard, that changed.
Yeah, because we usually get our first tornado in Arkansas for the year in January. That's what's been happening since 2000, most of the years. Your first tornado has been during the month of January. And then, of course, once you get later into the year, 2014, the first one didn't happen until April. Of course, we all know what happened in April back in 2014. So this continues to evolve as that cap begins to break. They sent another weather balloon up into the atmosphere around 12 o'clock, and you can clearly see now we got some issues because the cap is starting to lift, it's starting to break. We're not seeing as much of an inversion anymore, and that's when, as a meteorologist, you're looking at things, you're looking at the wind barbs here, You're looking at the hodograph in this area. You have curved hodographs, which I don't think we really knew that much about back in 1999. This is data that we had, but not necessarily a broadcast meteorologist looked at every little piece of detail, because there's still research out there trying to figure out, okay, here's how the atmosphere operates. Now, in the present, we look at that curved hodograph, and that tells you you're going to likely have a better chance of tornadoes. But here is the STP, or significant tornado parameter, and it inches up, but still not too significant because it's still hanging on to that cap. Then once we get to 0Z, which is going to be 6 o'clock in the evening, the cap's broken. You can clearly see we have the cape in place. So that means these storms, they explode, they shoot up into the atmosphere, develop really strong updrafts. Those updrafts are rotating, the whole storm is rotating, and that's when you have supercells develop across the region. And that was the case back in 1999.
It seems to me, just looking at this graphic, the STP is still, you would think it's going to go up.
Yeah, you would think so.
That's a 1. That really didn't change a whole lot. I mean, it went up to 1, but you look at those strong tornadoes, you want to see 4s and 5s and 6s for those stronger in tornadoes.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this, it's not ideal. I mean, this does
not. Boy, it overproduced.
It does not scream out tornado outbreak to me. Maybe a few supercells, but certainly nothing like what we saw. And I'm sure the National Weather Service also felt the same way. Like, okay, we could have a few tornadoes. There could be, we were under high risk. That means there could be a long-lived, long-track tornado, and that was not just one, but several tornadoes across the region. So let's take a look now at some other information here, because we can go back and look at parameters, which is pretty cool. If I can see where I went with that. I saw that one time here. Composites, dew point, surface temperature. So there's your cape, your surface base cape, and that's at 21Z. So this is as everything is starting to initiate. Bullseye, right over Arkansas and into the Arklamis, and then stretches up into Memphis.
So this really truly goes along with the high risk area that you show.
Yeah, it matches up with that perfectly. And when we take a look at some other information here, the surface and dew point, there's just so much to look at. And this is what we do as meteorologists. We're looking at so much data along with the SPC, trying to figure out where everything is lining up, where are we expecting the best chance of supercells to develop. And of course, storm chasers have a tough time in figuring that as well. Your lifted index, now we don't talk about this too much, but this basically says, when you have a lifted index, the lower the number is, because you're seeing -8 to -6, that means that these storms are going to have really good capability of producing some big hail and also very explosive development. Because when you have a lifted index, you get into the -7, -8 range. As soon as that cap goes, those storms shoot up into the atmosphere very quickly. And let's see here. Let's take a look at, well, your short range helicity doesn't look too bad. Storm relative helicity. Nothing screams out there too much. So that's the parameters. The day was set. Now we're going to go and look at how it all unfolded on radar. So this is 18Z that day, which would be 12 o'clock.
Yeah, 12, yeah.
The radar is very quiet because of the cap. So the clouds
nothing there yet.
Were not growing. There was no big updrafts developing. But let me advance this, and once we get into, this is now 1 o'clock, start to see some cells develop, Hempstead County into Nevada County, and then also into Clark County, and they just start to get that supercell look to them really quickly. So now we're into about 2 o'clock time frame. And as a meteorologist, you're thinking, okay, what's going on here? Looks like we have a hail marker starting to pop up around Hot Springs at that time. Were they rotating? Nothing too crazy looking at the velocity, base velocity, but it all started to change when we get later in the day. So now we're going to go to the next data set here, and this is going into 3 o'clock time frame, and there you go. So you said you were out.
It was out west. It was out west. Yeah, 4:30 and Cantrell Road.
Do you remember what time that was?
We were right here. It was about that time, 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
We began to see those cells start to come together, and it was okay. We're going to go out here. We're going to keep a close eye on them. I'm not a storm chaser. Don't profess to be one. Don't want to be one. That's as close to a supercell as I ever want to be if I'm in a live truck or anything like that. But that's what my job was back then. When Ed was chief, he was here. He's tracking severe weather. Let's send Tom out. Yeah, he'll do it. and back then, just to set the stage here, we tell folks, hey, be careful, don't get out of your car, lightning, X, Y, Z. So we have this live truck, and it has a mast that goes up several feet.
I remember those days, yeah.
We were at an angle, and we could see the towers on Chenal Mountain to where we didn't have to lift the mast, but we're still in danger of lightning. So we didn't have to do that. If it got bad, we could get in the truck and we could get out of there. So I'm standing there looking off to the west. We're going live talking to Ed. Those first warnings are coming down, more than likely for that cell that you're seeing here. And I'm just off to the west of us. You can see that it's, of course, very dark. You can see the lowering. There's probably some big hail within this storm.
Yeah.
So, but that was just one of 3 that afternoon that we were able to see from where we were. And then we broke down and went back into downtown for that one that came up I-30.
So back in the day,
Yep.
there was no way of viewers really contacting us other than through a phone.
Oh, and I remember this. We had folks stopping us. Hey, what's going on?
That's what my next question was.
I said, well, we've got tornado warned storms right behind you here. People were oblivious to what was happening.
They didn't know.
Yeah.
Because the only information was, here's a tornado watch issued, or across the screen, scrolling on regular TV. Now there's so many other ways that people get information. Hopefully they listen and tune in, because we're just not
and you would pick
speaking to hear ourselves talk.
Yeah, some radio stations would carry the broadcasts. I can't remember if we were being carried back then, but we tried to partner up with a radio group, a radio station, to let people know what was going on.
Yeah. So as a meteorologist looking at this, we got supercell here, we got a supercell here, we got a supercell here. Training supercells, one of the worst situations that we see as a meteorologist, and it's a nightmare situation because any one of these cells could produce a long track tornado. That's when the supercell happens, and it could just be one tornado after the next because there's nothing here to choke off any of those cells.
This is nothing but fuel here.
Yeah, with temperatures into the 70s that day. And you're thinking, okay, is it going to build more to the east? I mean, is there a front moving in? You got a supercell down here in Star City as well. So that's just, it gets worse and worse. Like, we're looking at this.
Would you pop that back up, Perry, the storm track into the main screen? Thank you.
This is near El Paso. Looks clear hook echo. That could be a debris ball. Let's see if what the velocity says. And
near El Paso,
yeah, definitely there was something
north
there.
Of El Paso.
Yeah. So that was rotating. Let's see if the NROT would have picked up on it. And again, we didn't have tools like this. Like dual pole and this NROT, or which really pinpoints the rotation, didn't come out until the 2000s. So 1999, all you had was base velocity and base reflectivity. You had that classic signature, but...
And let me add this too. We were tracking these with live radar, with our own live radar.
Yeah.
Because NexRad radar data was still delayed, a few minutes old. So when you're able to track this live on radar, you're getting, the most up-to-date pic. 1 minute, every minute it's updating. So that was another thing back in the late 90s, but technology has kept up. In fact, it's pretty much surpassed the need for us to have a live radar anymore. It's still sitting up on that mountain.
Yeah, a lot of stations the maintenance is just too
It is
expensive.
expensive. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So we have another hook echo here.
Yep.
The hail marker says 2-inch hail. We were getting hail that day 4 to 5 inches. I think they had a 5-inch hailstone in Jackson County that day. Yeah. So it's just amazing how all these supercells continue to develop, and there was no stopping them. Now that is impressive when you see a red triangle right there. So we're getting right there with the radar doom.
But see, that's out on Highway 10. You've got that red. I don't remember a tornado ever touching down in that area, though, with that red triangle.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely something
going on.
Like, that's kind of weird right there.
Yeah. And again, what time was that?
So now I think we're about 5 o'clock.
See, and this may have been the last one that we were on, because we had heard that we were getting reports of, the softball-sized, baseball and softball-sized hail out of that one that moved north of us.
As a meteorologist, you're like, oh my gosh, this is not going to end. Like, this is not going to end until the front moves through. So they're going to continue to train and develop across the region, and this is going to be a long night ahead of us. So let's go to the next data set. So now we are starting at the same point, and there's the red again. Mm-hmm. So now we're getting into the evening hours.
They just kept going. Look at them, one right after another.
Supercell. We don't show the warnings on here because we didn't have that data, but I'm sure there were probably tornado warnings all over the place, because seeing a hook echo, any meteorologist would be like, well, we're going to warn on that. Mm-hmm. So I imagine there was a tornado warning here. Probably all of central Arkansas was under a tornado warning at one point here, during this event.
Right, over in eastern Arkansas near Clarendon. And I'm trying to remember, and it may have been that cell that you've got south of Malvern. This is the one that traveled up and went through Little Rock.
Yeah.
And impact.
That may have been the I-30 one.
Because it also hit BB. That one also went through BB later that night. And these were nighttime tornadoes. These are the worst possible scenario. You start in the afternoon with these supercells. You end up at night with them producing tornadoes. BB was hit hard. The mess that was made over here, that we had a young man work here. His name's Thomas Kropfel. I think Perry may remember Thomas. Thomas left a few years back, but he put together this great learning tool, this almost documentary style of what happened that night, because he was there, and they have it still at the Museum of Discovery.
Now, do you remember if Whitehall got hit?
I don't remember the Whitehall tornado. Don't remember that one. But that would be a strong indication there was one
that's there. With that lined up and all the radar signature and all that.
Every one of those cells are supercells.
And it didn't end until what?
Yeah.
Late at night?
Oh yeah, it went on into the early morning hours the next day.
So did you come back and help Ed, or were you like, you had to work the morning show, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, what I do remember about that is after the tornado hit, it was of course chaos downtown. The Governor Huckabee at that time, they reassigned me to downtown Little Rock. Ann Jansen, Ed Buckner, they were here. And they, in my IFB, they said, hey, if you see the governor, get the governor for Ann. Walked right up to him, said, hey, Governor, how are you? Hey, Tom, just taking a look at the mess. And Ann Jansen would like to talk to you if you got a second. Sure, why not? So he walked over and we were able to have a talk back with him about what transpired over in that area, that South on Main area there.
Well, these are all the reports with all the counties and tracks and everything. And it's just numerous counties. And these were not just weak tornadoes. These were strong F2s, F3s, and you can see the damage.
Wow, this one, the
$1 million, $2 million.
Clay County, Northeast Arkansas, F4. And at that time, they were F-rated, not EF rated. They made what year was it that it went from Fujita to enhanced Fujita? Come on, Nathan.
Was it 2000?
I couldn't tell you. It was not long after
or something like that?
Yeah.
I want to say. But yeah, I mean, so this is not the tornadoes. This is all the reports of the tornadoes that made their way through. So they just count, if the same tornado went through different counties, they count that as 2 or 3 for the most part. And we'll get to the whole conglomerate of what it looked like on a map. But here's the one that you were talking about in Little Rock, Tom. Mm-hmm. So
storm track.
It developed right along the border of Pulaski County and Saline County, and then it went right over Southwest Little Rock, and the summary says right there, strong tornado moved from eastern Saline County into southwest Pulaski County. Trees were down as the tornado entered Pulaski County with some roof damage to a business along Interstate 30, about 5 miles southwest of Little Rock. It crossed 630. In this area, many homes and businesses, at least 235 structures were heavily damaged or destroyed. It was estimated around 750 structures sustained at least some damage. So that was very impressive.
Yeah. I was trying to come up with the name, South Main Quapaw area that was hit by that. And that was the same tornado that went, it may have lifted a bit, then hit Beebe in White County. So it was that same supercell, that parent supercell.
And people think that tornadoes don't hit cities. Of course,
well,
we found out.
We figured that one out a couple of years ago,
yeah.
that they do sometimes hit larger metropolitan
areas. It's still so
areas.
weird to go through that area, but it's good to see new construction and people building back up. But it's so weird with all the trees gone, because it's like no trees, and then you go into the Pleasant Valley area and there's trees.
And if you drive the North Little Rock side of things on I-40, going west, you can see the clear path where those trees were torn out over toward the Burns Park. Used to not could see the back end of the Burns Park Tennis Center. That's how close it was to the tennis center. All those trees are gone. The park was messed up, and that was a continuous track.
Yeah, and that was not as many tornadoes, but certainly still very impactful.
Yeah.
So here's the map.
Yep.
56 tornadoes, 30 were weak, F0, F1. Then you had 14 that were F2, 11 that were F3, and then you had that one F4 way up into Clay County. But it looks like the worst areas that got the most amount of tornadoes was just northeast of the metro, where White County and Independence County really got hit hard. As we see some of the tracks here, Joy, Pangburn, El Paso, BB.
El Paso. Yeah.
That's just unbelievable for all those tornadoes just to be lined up like that.
And we saw those supercells coming. They were still developing. We could see them and notice that most of this happened either along 67, 167, or just east. There's not many tornadoes back to the west. And the same holds true out western Pulaski County. They were just getting going. They were getting stronger, and then got strong enough. They moved into that environment, that high-risk environment, and there you go.
It'd be interesting to see how the geography played a part, because with the Little Rock tornado, they did a lot of research and said geography played a significant part as it made its way over Markham and in towards Pleasant Valley. When it went down the hill, it really started to rotate a lot more, because I guess going over the hills and all that really produced a lot more rotation. Of course, you're getting right along the border here of the Ozarks, so that could be interesting.
Yeah. Got a little bit more of a ridge, the mountainous areas here. Yeah, very interesting. You hear, oh, well, it doesn't matter. The topography doesn't matter. It does matter, and then it doesn't matter. So you've got that mountain, that ridge, that hill through central Arkansas, western Pulaski County, and everything is flat to the east. And people will claim, Nathan, and they'll come up and tell you, this is Tornado Alley in Arkansas, that I-30 corridor. We live in Tornado Alley. They'll say
Well, I'm
that.
sure Valonia feels that way too.
Yeah. In Valonia, and I knock on wood or whatever, after 2011 and 2014, they're not being as picked on, it seems.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to happen. I mean, we certainly don't want that, but it just seems that things kind of settle down. You get a burst of tornadoes a few years, and then you get a break.
And this was a La Nina year. This was a strong
I was going to ask if you
La
remember
Nina
that.
year.
Strong La Nina.
Yeah, and the strong La Nina year, so we have a graphic on that. Active tornado years primarily happens when you have a strong La Nina, and there you see, 1999 ended up with 107 tornadoes that entire year. So that's the most we've had on record in Arkansas, followed by 81 in 2008. Of course, this past year, it was active. It's 60, and it wasn't a strong La Nina.
Yeah. 3 out of 4 of those years, I was here, and not 82.
Yeah.
Not 1982. There you go.
Well, Tom, I think we're out of time.
Okay, well, good.
I'm so sorry to cut you off, but...
no, darn. We could go for an hour and a half.
We could. We certainly could. It's always really cool to go ahead and talk with you about these past events since you were here, since you experienced it.
I'll tell you what I can
firsthand.
remember, and it's beginning. You can only cram so much. Some of it goes away after a while, but 97 and 99 were the two most impactful for me.
I think the lesson here is tornadoes can happen really any month. here in Arkansas, and that does include January. So this January looks like we will be able to escape the chance of tornadoes since it's going to be becoming much more cold. We're talking about the potential of a winter storm.
Yeah, later in the week.
Yeah,
Stay
later in the
tuned.
week. So we'll have more on that coming up with more streaming coverage here on THV 11 Plus. For now, that's all I have to say for Chief Meteorologist Tom Brannon and myself. Thank you for tuning in to Weatherwise. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.